So I did my presentation on the Sea Peoples. So yeah, let's get into it. First off, who were the Sea Peoples? Short answer is we don't really know. What we do know is that they were a group of seafaring marauders that attacked and disrupted the trade of Bronze Age empires between 1280 and 1170 BCE. They may have been a group of peoples, perhaps a confederation or something like that. And nearly everything we know comes from the accounts of 3 Egyptian pharaohs over the course of about a century. There's an account in 1274 BCE by Ramses II, who mentions them perhaps being allied with the Hittites, who Ramses was fighting at the time. But it also mentions them as serving as mercenaries in Ramses' army. In either case, the language used to describe them indicates that the Bronze Age peoples were very familiar with the Sea Peoples and would know who Ramses was talking about, and would not need further introduction. So we speculate their origin could be Etruscan, Philistine, Mycenaean, etc. There was one account from a later pharaoh, Merenptah, who mentioned them as being from the lands of Ekwesh, Teresh, Luka, Shurdan, and Shekelesh. So we do have some names to go along with that. However, scholars do not actually know what geographical areas these lands correspond to, and so we still don't know who they are. Again, we do know they were a major contributor to the Bronze Age collapse by disrupting trade. They attacked Egypt, Greece, and the Hittite Empire, along with a lot of others. But yeah, so this is the world of the Late Bronze Age. The world that the Sea Peoples came into was importantly already in turmoil even before them. They were not the sole cause of the Bronze Age collapse, even though they contributed to it. There were likely other factors like climate change, and which likely led to crop failures and famine. Also, there's the possibility of frequent natural disasters, which kind of damaged infrastructure and kind of obviously hurt the physical and cultural fabric of kind of these civilizations. And then obviously internal discord and rebellion was likely worsened by these factors, but it also may have been caused by these factors. So yeah, that all contributed to the collapse. So the world the Sea Peoples attacked was already under stress, which likely made their impact on Bronze Age civilizations more acute. So as mentioned previously, their kind of first appearance in the historical record comes from the pharaoh Ramses II around 1280. He defeated the Sea Peoples in a small naval battle in the second year of his reign, so that was about 1278 BC. This battle was fought at the mouth of the Nile River, and Ramses kind of did like a bait and switch kind of maneuver where he lured them in with a small defensive fleet, and then fell on their flanks with the larger force. However, it does seem that this wasn't all the Sea Peoples. He only specifically mentions it being the Shurdan Sea Peoples, who we still don't know where they're from. After the battle, many were conscripted in Ramses' armies or even became his bodyguards. And as mentioned previously, he also encountered them when he forced the Hittite Empire out of Kadesh, an important trade center, so they were apparently involved on both sides of that conflict as well. And they were very familiar to the people of the Late Bronze Age. So kind of the onslaught begins, probably around 1200 BCE. This is kind of the Sea Peoples' run down kind of through the Mediterranean and when they caused their most destruction. It likely began in the northern Aegean. The attacks and trade disruptions it caused were very devastating to Mycenaean Greece. because the country's large population could not be sustained without maritime trade, and so that combined with the attacks sent the empire into free fall, and it collapsed. They also, after Mycenaean Greece, they kept making their way east, and they eventually started attacking the Hittites, and the kingdom of Ugarit, which is a little like trade kingdom, centered around the kind of city of Ugarit. The king of Ugarit actually wrote a very poignant letter to the king of Cyprus on a clay tablet, basically begging for aid because he had sent all his troops to help the Hittites fight off the attackers, even though, and so he had no forces. The letter was actually never sent, and it baked in the fire that occurred as the city burned from the Sea People's attacks, which is really quite insane. So this kind of collapse of both Ugarit and the Hittite Empire has been determined through like radiocarbon dating and archaeological and historical data to have occurred around 1194 to like 1190 BCE, and so that's when these empires fell. And then they also invaded Egypt in 1209 BCE, so a little earlier, with a coalition of Libyans, and our account of this comes from the pharaoh Merenptah. Tried to invade them from Egypt from the northern seas, and they seemed to be trying to establish permanent settlements. Merenptah ended up defeating them at Payer and took many of them captive. And so once again, they were unsuccessful in their invasion of Egypt. So yeah. Now the onslaught is halted. They've done all this destruction. They've done all these things. All these empires in collapse, and they finally in 1180 the people set their sights on Egypt once again. They were once again also allied with the Libyans, and were pretty confident of victory, and started kind of with these quick raids on the Egyptian coast before starting to make a push for the Nile Delta. So Ramses III now, in his account, recalls how he kind of used guerrilla tactics to defeat them. He would set up ambushes on the coasts and used archers to rain arrows down on their ships. After this kind of halted the sea invasion, he used these same tactics against their land forces. And these land forces were ultimately defeated at the Battle of Zoi in 1178 BCE. Like before, probably were forced into military service and or slavery. And this is really the last we see of them. After this, the Sea Peoples disappear from the historical record, and we don't really know what's happened to them, which is really kind of crazy considering how much damage they did to these civilizations. There is some speculation they may have been assimilated into Egyptian society, but we don't really know. So their legacy, Sea People's legacy. For these empires that were already engulfed in crisis, the Sea People's assault was kind of the final nail in the coffin. Even for the empires that weren't outright destroyed, they were greatly affected. Egypt, for example, successfully repelled them 3 times, but that final conflict absolutely depleted the Egyptian treasury, and their civilization suffered greatly from the collapse of trade with other empires that had fallen. It actually led to the first recorded labor strike in history when Egypt couldn't pay tomb builders at the village of Setmat. Like Egypt, the Assyrian Empire also survived, but had a rough go of it, for a while there. But the Hittites and the Mycenaeans were not so lucky. The Hittites fell and were kind of replaced by these kind of weak, short-lived, and ultimately non-really influential kingdoms. In Greece, the population of urban centers fell by about 90%, and which politically and economically isolated the state for centuries, and they wouldn't really come out of that for about 200 years. Overall, the power vacuum that the Sea Peoples created through their destruction of these empires led to the rise of a lot of new powers and alliances. And as these alliances were forged, you also kind of saw the forging. You also saw the forging of a new metal, which was iron. And so as the Iron Age dawned, and the Bronze Age ended, we were kind of left wondering what actually happened to these people that brought the Bronze Age to its knees. And yeah, those are my sources. Thank you.